Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. We are here to talk about every Big Ten team in Week 10. Just like you know, we talk about every single Big Ten team, every single episode. Not like any of those phony Big Ten podcasts out there that just talk about one or two. I watched a Big Ten podcast today, Zach. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to disparage anybody, but I watched a Big Ten podcast today, and they had three topics. Okay, you ready for the three topics?
Go for it.
The three topics. Will anybody ever beat Oregon? Was topic number one. They discussed that for about 20 minutes. Topic number two, Oregon versus Michigan. They discussed that for about 15 minutes. Topic number three, Ohio State, Penn State. They discussed that for about 15 minutes. And then the show was over.
I'm sorry. Do they not know what's going on in Bloomington right now?
Apparently not. Apparently we are the only ones, Zach.
These people, like, I mean, and I get it. Like, those are your four biggest programs. You've got USC, Washington. You've got Wisconsin, Iowa.
You got Minnesota, Illinois. You got Max Brosmer putting together the season of dreams for a Minnesota quarterback right now. You imagine if he goes out there and throws 300 yards again and four touchdowns. Now, I'm not predicting that to happen. Illinois has a much better defense than Maryland, but still, like, he's doing a really good job.
It's a national show masquerading as a Big Ten show. Let's just be honest. I don't know who you're talking about. We didn't discuss this beforehand, but I'm just saying blindly, if that was all they talked about, they're a national show masquerading as a Big Ten show. How dare they? By the way, you should vote for the best Big Ten show in Boat Wagon's poll, which is in the comments. Make sure you go vote for us. Do not let a national show beat the best Big Ten show.
Agreed. So Solid Verbal was not the show that I was talking about. It was in fact a different show. However, we are in a battle right now with Solid Verbal to be the best Big Ten podcast out there. I have put the link in the chat. I will put it in there later on again after the episode's over. I'll also put it in the description. If you can, if it's before tomorrow at like 9 o'clock, so Wednesday at 9 o'clock, please go and vote for the Big Ten Huddle. Solid Verbal is not even a Big Ten podcast. Boat Wagon just put it in there because he needed to fill up a spot, and he figured a Big Ten show would beat him. Well, they haven't yet, so we need to be that Big Ten show. Vote for the Big Ten Huddle to beat Solid Verbal.
Yes. This is a voting I can get behind.
Yes. John asks, JR, do you like covering Big Ten football more than Big Ten basketball or vice versa? Honestly, it goes through streaks. Big Ten football at the beginning of the year, I really don't like covering that much just because it's so much like FCS teams and stuff like that. And I find it really hard to preview and recap those games, but I still do them because I think every Big Ten team should be talked about on a Big Ten podcast. So I'm not going to say I don't like it. I don't like it as much as covering Big Ten football around playoff time, especially this year when you have four Big Ten teams possibly going to make it and all the stuff around that. Big Ten basketball, I like covering for the most part during the year. The tournament was the most fun last year, though, to cover. That was the Big Ten tournament, not even the national NCAA tournament. The Big Ten tournament was awesome. We went live every single night at like midnight, 1 a.m. after every single game. It was awesome. It was so much fun. So, we got Dave here, Skyuma. Yes, indeed, Skyuma. Dave Brenton says, Indiana, best team in the Big Ten in football, basketball, and soccer. Get wrecked, nerds. Hey, Indiana does have a very underrated soccer team. And I did pick the Hoosiers to win the Big Ten basketball conference this year. So
could you imagine if Indiana wins the Big Ten in football and basketball?
Brendan will never have a bad day ever again, I think.
Yeah. I just think Indiana might explode if that happens. I'm sorry in advance, JR.
I will report back. I live, just a few miles from Bloomington, so I'll report back if that does happen.
Yeah, either that or everyone will get free tenderloin sandwiches, which I can get behind.
Yeah. Dave says you guys are a lot better than the Voice of College Football Big Ten show. It runs by two Michigan guys. They whined about Michigan or they whine about Michigan every time. Yeah, Darren's still getting his getting used to it. He runs a Michigan channel. I say give him time. Darren's gonna do a good job. He does a good job with his Michigan channel. It just takes time. You should have seen me the very first time I went on started podcasting about it. You know that, right? Right, Zach? You know how it goes.
Yeah, I was like, how do I not be an Ohio State homer?
Exactly.
Ohio State's good. That's, I mean,
it humbled you that they lost a few times though, so that's good for
fair.
you.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Darren's just starting out. So, and I don't, I'm one of those people. I hope everybody listens to all the Big Ten shows out there. I think everybody puts in a lot of hard work, and for me, there's a ton of SEC shows out there. So if we can get as many Big Ten shows as there are SEC shows out there, more power to them. I think that's awesome.
Absolutely.
John Jacob says Solid Verbal only allows paid subscribers to participate in their live chat discussion. I did not know that. That's kind of lame.
It's very lame.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Ooh.
Last comment, then we'll get into the game, Zach. Brenton says, double wet Shalobi's tenderloins for all even Buckeyes. Wow, Brenton, I am honored. I
don't know what double wet Shalubi means, but if it has the word tenderloin in it, I'm in.
That's what I was going for. Is tenderloins? Yes. Bring it on. Oh my. Well, Zach, we got 8 games to get to, and all 8 of these games are pretty interesting in my mind to get to. So I think we better start off with the game of the week. Possibly the closest game of the week. It's actually the closest spread game of the week. Northwestern versus Purdue. Zach, Northwestern comes in as a 1-point favorite. The over-under is on 46.5. Both Hudson Card and Ryan Brown will both be available for this game. Your thoughts on the game, Zach?
I don't think it's going to be that close. Northwestern has not looked great over the past couple weeks. Purdue stinks.
Yeah.
That's my analysis. They stink.
Yeah.
And I think Northwestern's defense is just significantly better than anything Purdue's going to throw out there offensively. Like, Purdue's non-functional. Northwestern has been at least somewhat functional on both sides of the ball at times. Now, their offense has been abysmal at times too. But does Purdue have a defense? I don't know.
No, they don't.
Like, Dylan Thieneman is like on vacation this year. And I think it's kind of Ryan Walters' fault. Not kind of. Yeah. It is absolutely Ryan Walters' fault.
Yeah. John Jacobs is pointing out Purdue took Illinois 50-49. I think that was more because of Illinois making mistakes and Purdue having a quarterback that could run the ball, catching Illinois off guard, in my personal opinion. But yes, they do deserve credit for scoring 49 on Illinois. Is that the outlier game of the season, Zach?
You have to think so. Like, I'm pretty sure Xavier Scott was also out for that game.
Yeah.
Illinois had a healthy lead going into the second half. And I think it was the first time they saw Brown at quarterback. Could Purdue shock us? Yes, because Northwestern is not that good. Like, they're not a good team, but right. I don't know. Like, honestly, I feel like Northwestern's defense is good enough where they might turn Purdue over like quite a few times, and it just gets ugly. Now, the one difference could be like Hudson Card's coming back from injury. Maybe he has a comeback game because he's talented. Like, he's a talented guy, but I don't have that in the cards.
Yeah,
so I've got 27-10 is my final score.
Yeah, I've got 31-10 for me. I think that Purdue needs to essentially accept that they are Michigan light at this point, the Michigan that we saw against Michigan State. If they want any chance of winning and having a good team, they need to utilize Ryan Brown and Hudson Card the way that Michigan utilized Davis Warren and Alex Orji together. Now, the problem is Ryan Brown is not as big as Alex Orji, so he can't withstand the same amount of hits that Alex Orji can, so you're running the risk of possibly Ryan Brown getting hurt. But as long as Hudson Card is healthy, I think, if that happens, you can still manage with that. But Northwestern, I mean, their biggest thing for me to watch in this game is they have to get more production on first down. There were a lot of plays in the past few games that are like 1 yard, 2 yard, loss of yards on first down. That just puts Jack Loush in a terrible position when you're doing that. And he has to make big plays. And that's what you saw against Maryland was all the big plays. They had a couple on first down, and then the rest of them were like on second down. You had like 50, 30-yard pass plays. That really put Northwestern in a good enough position to score. That's how Northwestern was able to put up 37. But then they came back to earth next week, and Wisconsin didn't allow the big plays, and then they only scored 3 points. So,
yeah. To that point, I think designed runs for Jack Loush is going to be a key to win.
Yeah, I agree. And which, if he gets hurt, guess what? You got Mike Wright behind him.
Yep.
He can do the same thing.
Designed runs, Mike Wright.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, quarterback run.
All right, Zach. Good discussion there. What's John saying? He says, I don't know what is worse, JR's disdain for Ferentz or Zach's disdain for Walters in Purdue.
No.
I really don't hate Ferentz all that much. I just called him overrated one time.
And I don't hate Walters.
Yeah.
Now, if this were Mike Locksley, we have a whole different conversation. But I don't have disdain for Walters. I think he's just in over his head.
Yeah, I think it's Locksley or Fleck for you, one of those two.
It's definitely Locksley.
Okay.
Fleck annoys me, but he takes enough antidote for me to be okay with it.
Good. I'm glad the antidote helps with that. So, all right, let's get to our next game, Zach. UCLA and Nebraska. Nebraska is a 7-point favorite in this one. Even at home, I feel like that is just so low for Nebraska to only be a 7-point favorite. However, the offense has looked pretty bad the past couple of weeks against Ohio State. They did score 17 points, but there were definitely opportunities for more, as you and I detailed in that game recap. And then UCLA, they're trying to figure it out right now. Ethan Garbers 2 weeks ago, they're coming off a bye. Ethan Garbers 2 weeks ago had a really, really good game. I think I gave him an A in my quarterback grades. It was probably his best game of the season, but is he going to be able to duplicate that against Nebraska? Nebraska is a much tougher defense to go against than Rutgers. It was against Rutgers, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then Rutgers in my mind. Now, I think Rutgers healthy. That's a different story, but with the way Rutgers is right now, that's just kind of the truth of where it's at. So, Zach, what are your thoughts going into this one?
I think it's a terrible matchup for UCLA. I agree with you on the spread. I think odds makers saw the Indiana Nebraska game.
Sorry, I had to put that up. That was really funny.
Yeah, that's really funny. I think odds makers and I think fans alike, including us as Ohio State guys, we saw the Nebraska-Indiana game. We're like, Nebraska's not nearly as good as we thought. I do think Nebraska is a borderline top 25 team. And I think the strength of their team, their run defense, and, I think their physicality up front, I think is honestly one of their strengths. And you're talking about going against a UCLA team that I don't think can exploit you down the field. I think they have a much better intermediate passing game than they do deep passing game. And they can't run the ball. TJ Harden, their best rusher, 62 carries for 180 yards. That's their best running back. They don't have a running game. And you're going to go against a Nebraska team that I know Ohio State's line was maligned last week, but they only got 60 yards rushing on Nebraska. What's UCLA going to do? I just don't think it's going to be a good day for UCLA. And UCLA defensively, I don't think they're going to hold up against Nebraska's physicality. So I think Dowdell will have a good game. I think they'll have a couple of play action opportunities to get Banks and Nair involved, get a couple of jump balls. I think Nebraska wins. I do think it's lower scoring. I have Nebraska 24, UCLA 13.
Man, you and I are close on the first two today. I have Nebraska 21, UCLA 10, which is strange because UCLA has done a good job of scoring at times this season. Like I outlined against Rutgers, they had 35 points. The issue for me is in that game, Ethan Garbers did a really good job of throwing kind of those intermediate and short passes, like 0 to 20 yards. He did a really good job of that, and that's kind of what his bread and butter is. Ethan Garbers is not a deep ball thrower. He's one of the worst deep ball throwers in the Big Ten. And when that happens, that's a problem because Nebraska is a team that is susceptible to the deep ball. So one of two things are going to happen here. Either Ethan Garbers is going to turn into a good deep ball thrower, or Nebraska's going to turn into a defense that can't defend the short to mid-range passing game. I have more confidence in Nebraska's defense because I've seen it happen more often this year, and so that's obviously where I go. I think that Nebraska, their poor passing attack versus UCLA's poor secondary is kind of the bad on bad here, where we figure out like what hits each other and what goes wrong. But I like what Nebraska was running against Ohio State with the pick plays. They throw a lot of balls behind the line of scrimmage, but with some of those pick plays and what they were able to do, I felt like that was a really good thing. Dylan Raiola, just point blank, he just has to hit those receivers. So yep. I don't know if UCLA, I don't think they have a great pass rush. Maybe they send enough guys in the blitz to make him more nervous, pressure him more. But at the end of the day, I think Dylan Raiola, he's going to hit those guys eventually. And I think you're going to have more opportunities to do that against UCLA than you did against Ohio State. So anything further on that before we move on, Zach?
No, I think we've covered it effectively.
I think we did too. Philip puts in his score prediction. He says 24-7 Nebraska. So he's pretty much in line with us. We got to start keeping track of these. I really should have started doing that at the beginning of the year. Maybe we'll keep track at a certain point this year. Sean, we'll get to Illinois and Minnesota here soon, but he says Illinois is beating Minnesota.
Interesting.
Calling a shot.
Interesting.
Illinois
fans don't want me to pick Illinois.
Yeah, that's true. They don't. However, it didn't help last week.
No, it didn't. It wasn't going to help. It wasn't going to help last week.
Yeah. John asks 62 carries for 180 yards the entire year. Yeah, that's TJ Harden. Honestly, Ethan Garbers would probably still be your leading rusher for UCLA if they didn't count sacks as rushing yards. Guys, that's week 10, and your quarterback probably has more rushing yards than your leading running back. Really bad.
He's not a good runner either.
That's not a
good thing.
Yeah, if you just take away the sacks, yeah. All right, Zach, let's get to USC Washington. Bit of an underrated matchup here. I think that this is an interesting one. One of the reasons I didn't put it higher is just because there's really no national recognition for this one, but you have Washington, who I think has a good shot of winning this game, and then you also have USC really trying to prove something with Lincoln Riley, trying to get himself out of that hot seat kind of discussion. People out there, I don't really know how much he is on the hot seat because rumor is his buyout is like $90 million. So, unless the athletic director at USC wants to pull a Ross Bjork over at Texas A&M, you're probably stuck with Lincoln Riley for a little bit. Yeah, but anyway, in this one, I couldn't find any major injuries or anything like that. Seems like Jonah Coleman's doing fine, and the weapons for Washington, USC seems to be doing fine. But Zach, for me, one of the biggest pieces of this game is Woody Marks. He has been an underrated piece of success for USC all year. He doesn't put up the big numbers, so you don't really kind of see that stuff. I think he's only averaging 5 yards per carry this year, but what he's able to do in the passing game, the pass blocking saves the offensive line time and time again, and I think that that's improved over the last 3 weeks because I think Miller Moss has done a better job of identifying where the blitz and stuff like that is coming from, and so that's helping him not only with the offensive line, but especially with Woody Marks back there, who's able to pick up those blitzes. So he does a good job. But for me, I still think Washington has too much. I think Washington has a lot in this game, and I don't know if USC has enough. What's your thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, so I think as I looked at this game, I thought I was going to be where you're at, JR. This is just the past 5 games. Indiana, they scored 17. Iowa, they scored 16. Michigan, they scored 27. Rutgers, they scored 18. Northwestern, they scored 24. And so only in 2 games of the past 5, they have scored over 20 points. They have not gotten over 30. And you look at what they've given up. They gave up 31 to a backup quarterback in Indiana, I think Taven Jackson's a good backup quarterback. They gave up 40 to Iowa. 40. Now they only gave up 17 to Michigan.
That's a Northwestern level right there. They gave up 40 as well.
Yeah. And then Rutgers, they gave up 21. I think in my mind, the idea of Washington is better than Washington. Because I look at their playmakers and I'm like, Denzel Boston is like really good, and Giles Jackson is really good, and Jonah Coleman is really good. But there's just not, it just has not been very effective, at least for winning football. Right.
So are you still on the train that Washington's pass defense is only up there and only good because of the teams they've faced?
I think so.
Yeah.
And again, look at those last 5 games. Indiana, backup quarterback. Iowa, LOL. Michigan, LOL. Rutgers, Northwestern.
Yeah.
They're not effective passing attacks. And now you've got Miller Moss with his group of receivers and Woody Marks, 133 carries, 755 yards for this season. And we've kind of lambasted USC for their lack of physicality, but they've been pretty good up front offensively. Especially, and Marks, has done a good job. I think you make a really good point that Marks has done a good job in helping with that pass protection.
He's been a huge piece to help with them.
Yeah. So I think I am hesitant to pull the trigger on this because it's at Washington, but I actually I'm going to pick USC on the road.
Okay. What's your score?
So I think it's high scoring because I think USC's defense is not great, but I think Danton Lynn's defense gets one stop in the fourth quarter. I've got 38-34.
All right, 38-34. So both over 30. Is that Washington's first? No, Washington scored 30 against Eastern Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I like Washington's opportunity to move the ball on USC. USC is a team that is giving up way too many completions. I mean, I think they're giving up, what is it? I have written down like 68% completion percentage. That's, among the worst in college football. And then at the same time, Washington is completing around 72% of their passes this season, which is among the best. So for me, that's good on bad. And I don't really see a pass rush from USC that's going to affect that in a large way. But then the other piece of that is that Washington gets a lot of yards, but they don't score as much because, one, their kicker hasn't been reliable all season long. He's done good at points this season, but he hasn't been reliable all season long. And then you also have the penalties. But I think the underrated part of USC that not everybody talks about is they average 6 penalties a game. Washington averages 7. So for me, if I'm looking at this and saying, well, Washington's going to hurt themselves by getting penalties, USC might bail them out in a few spots. And so while I can definitely see a path for USC to win, I'm more confident in Washington because I look at who can make the plays and who has the playmakers. I think when you look at running back, you give it to Washington. I think when you look at wide receiver, you give it to Washington. I think when you look at tight end, you give it to Washington, maybe it's push. If not, you give it to Washington. And I think O-line, you give it to Washington. And I think quarterback, push at the very least, but I still like Will Rogers better, even with the 2 interceptions last game. I think that was more on Indiana just playing really good defense than it was Washington being bad. And then when I look at the defense, I mean, I think Washington probably has a better defense than USC does, but like this USC team, their secondary is supposed to be the strength, but they're giving up 68% of passes being completed. So, and that's against like they played Michigan, they did play Penn State, so you got to give them credit there. But they have some teams on there as well that were not great passing attacks. So even though I do think Washington's top 3 pass defense is a little bit of fool's gold, I do think that their numbers say something about who they are, and I think that this is going to be a pass defense that should do a good job of containing Miller Moss. I don't think they're going to stop him completely, but I could see them containing Miller Moss and him not having any more than 2 or 3 touchdown passes at most in this one. So I'm going to go with Washington 31-24. So
I'll just throw this out there. I think either of them are either of those results are possible. It is interesting that the analytics really love USC. Like if you look at FPI, they're giving USC a 67.7% chance of victory over Washington at Washington. So it's interesting. I'd be curious. I want to look up Sagarin real quick.
I'll look up SP Plus really fast.
Yeah, like it's interesting because I think, and again, I think I love the idea of Washington more than Washington. And I think that's why I'm like, I don't know. Like, let's see, Sagarin. So Sagarin sees Southern Cal as the 20th best team in the country.
And SP Plus has USC winning by 1, 29-28.
Interesting. And then looking at Sagarin, so Southern Cal's 20, Washington, let's see. Where is Washington?
They so far down there?
They're 52.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's so, pretty low.
Yeah, like computers are not hot. And like, not that you can base everything by computers, but
right.
It is interesting. Like even Josh Pate, like JP poll had USC, which is a power rating. It's not rankings, right, but it had them, I think, in the top 20 also. So like all across the board, you have like a significant gap between USC and Washington.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think we'll figure out how it plays out on the field, right, Zach? Yeah. And here we go. Here's the biggest factor. Brenton pointed out USC. They don't have pawns.
Look at that. Look at that. Indiana making its way into the West Coast division of the Big Ten.
If only they had D'Angelo Pons.
All right, everybody. I feel like this is a battle between JR and the humans and me and the computers, robots that are taking over the world. So,
well, as long as they don't take over our podcast, I'm okay.
There we go.
Yeah. All right, everybody, we're going to hit a commercial break really fast, and then we'll be right back. Stay with us. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zach Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, I just put the link for the Boat Wagon poll in the chat again. So if you are in the chat, if you can see the chat, please go ahead and go over there. Don't turn this off. Do one of the thing where you open the new tab and stuff like that. But if you could go over there and vote for the Big Ten Huddle, we would appreciate it. If you don't know what the poll is and stuff like that, go back to the beginning of the episode. We explained it a little bit there. And also, like and subscribe. We appreciate that. So you got 2 directives really fast. Go to that, vote for the Big Ten Huddle, come back here, like. If you're already subscribed, good to go. If you're not, subscribe. All right. Zach, Indiana, Michigan State. At Michigan State, so Indiana has to go on the road for this one. So I feel like every single week there's some kind of other obstacle Indiana has to face. This one is going on the road. I mean, obviously they've been on the road at other points of the season, but this is a little bit of a better team that they have to go on the road against. However, it does look like Curtis Rourke will most likely return. That's not been confirmed yet, like publicly, but that seems to be the sentiment that we're getting from the writers and people like that. I think that does really, really good things for Indiana. And honestly, Zach, I don't know if I have all that much analysis other than Indiana, good, Michigan State, not as good, and Indiana will win by a lot. Your thoughts, Zach?
First of all, I am offended that this game is on Peacock.
Yeah.
I mean, Indiana is must-see TV. Put Northwestern Purdue on Peacock. What are we doing? No offense to Northwestern Purdue fans.
Northwestern Purdue wouldn't get any viewers. Like, I'm sorry, Northwestern and Purdue fans, but there's not a lot of people seeking that game out right now.
But why? I think Peacock's a good platform, but I hate that college football has gone to like some pay-per-view type stuff. Like it's just terrible. So I've seen your score prediction, so I'm not going to unveil it yet. I think we look at this game a little differently.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah,
Do tell.
So I think Michigan State's been improving, and I think there was a real legitimate shot for them to win last week against Michigan. And that was against a Michigan team that I think has like came out of the, were they coming off a bye? I'm trying to remember. Yeah, they came off a bye.
Yeah.
Like they came off a bye and they actually kind of addressed things, unlike a certain team that we'll talk about at the end of the show. Yeah. But I think if not for some like typical Michigan State shenanigans, I think Michigan State actually would have won that game on the road. And I think they're putting things together. I'll say this. I think Aiden Childs is the most talented quarterback they've faced. Now, I think he's certainly prone to turnovers. So I'm not saying he is the best quarterback they've faced, but I think he's the most talented quarterback they've faced. I think the defense is better than people give it credit for. And I just think Indiana is kind of due for a letdown. So I don't think Indiana's going to lose. So before Indiana fans tar and feather me, like, how dare you? But like, I think Michigan State's going to put up some resistance in this game. And I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be closer than you think it's going to be. So.
Okay. I can hear you on that. I think that Michigan State has good trenches, and that is one of their biggest strengths. I mean, I've said that on this show so many times. I don't even want to say it's underrated at this point. Obviously, nationally it is, but if you watch the show, you know I think that. But the thing is, Indiana has really, really good trenches too. So when the strongest part of a team is not as good as another part of another team, I look at this game and I'm like, where does Michigan State score more than 20? Like, how does that happen in this game? Because I can't see it happening other than Aiden Childs just going off and having 3 touchdown passes, going 24 for 28 and 300 plus yards, which is possible, but it's another one of those things. Like I said with the Illinois game, it was possible for Illinois to beat Oregon, just the path for it to happen, there were so few and Oregon had so many more paths. I look at this game kind of the same way with Indiana and Michigan State. Are there paths for Michigan State to win? Sure. There's just not very many, and there's far more paths for Indiana to win. And I think Indiana, with Curtis Rourke coming back, they're going to be coming out and they're going to be looking to try and make a statement again, because if we know anything about Kirk Cinetti, it's that he wasn't satisfied with that last game. They only put up 31 points. That was their season low they had against FIU at the beginning of the season. You know he wasn't happy with that one. And so if Curtis Rourke is good to come back, you best believe Kirk Cinetti is going up to those guys and saying, hey, we got to get 40 plus in this one. We have to assert our dominance because guess what? They got us ranked 13th in the polls. I really feel like that just continues to fuel this Indiana team. I think if Indiana was ranked top 5 and they felt a little comfortable, maybe you could see a little bit of a letdown and you could see a situation where it's a close game with Michigan State. But man, like, Michigan State has 21 sacks on the season. To me, that's fool's gold. That is complete fool's gold because they've not had a game with more than 4 pressures against a Big Ten team not named Maryland. And Maryland has the worst offensive line in the Big Ten by far. So for me, like, they're not they're not going to put pressure on Curtis Rourke, even if it isn't Curtis Rourke, if it's Taven Jackson. And I'm banking on it being Curtis Rourke. I think he's going to play.
Yeah.
But even if they don't, like, they're not going to put a bunch of pressure on Taven Jackson. And if you look at that Michigan State game against Iowa and say, well, they stopped the run in that one, the difference in that one is they didn't respect Cade McNamara at all. You have to respect Curtis Rourke. Now, like I said, if it's Taven Jackson, that's a different story. Not that Taven Jackson's bad. He's just not Curtis Rourke. That's a little bit of a different story. You can key in on the run game a little bit more. But, man, we saw Indiana, they have multiple ways to beat teams now. And I think that just plays into their favor. I think that they're fired up. And honestly, like, I look at Michigan State, and the one thing I look at on offense to say, okay, maybe they have a chance is Marsh and Foster on the outside. But what did Denzel Boston and Giles Jackson do? 43 yards and 11 yards. Like, I'm not saying those guys are better or worse. I think that that's a good wide receiver tandem, just like I think Marsh and Foster are a good wide receiver tandem.
Mm-hmm.
But with D'Angelo Pons and the secondary Indiana display that they had, I mean, 2 picks, 0 touchdowns for Will Rogers. Like, I think this is a fired up team. Honestly, I think Indiana cruises 49-13.
49-13. Woo.
Yeah.
I think you make good points. Someone put it in the chat. I think Michigan State does play better at home. I will also contend that Jonathan Smith is quite a bit better of a coach than Jed Fish. So
I mean, yeah, but what was that stupid decision he made against Michigan? Like, you got a turnover-prone quarterback, and it's 20 seconds left, and you're going to try to drive down the field and get a touchdown when you have the lead going into half. Like,
okay, that's one decision.
yeah.
Jed Fish has made a litany of those decisions.
Yes, that's true.
So, and I certainly think that could happen. I'll also just say, when I say letdown, I'm not saying letdown in the sense that Indiana, like, is, puffing up their chest and they're like not taking Michigan State seriously. I wonder if Curtis Rourke comes back, is there some rust? And is there some, like, not collateral damage, but like, is there something, and is again mentioned in the chat, but like, he's shaken off a hand injury. Like, I just wonder if that adds to some things. And I think Michigan State is good enough to exploit that to some degree. I still think Indiana wins. I've got 34-23.
I guess my thing is even if Curtis Rourke, let's say he does come out and he's not able to throw the ball like he was before, we really think that Michigan State is going to be able to stop this rushing attack? Like Justin Hellison, Tyson Law, Tyson Law. Like, I mean, I know, like I said, I know they stopped Iowa, but give me Curtis Rourke with 2 screws in his thumbs over Cade McNamara any day. Like,
well, yeah, amen. That's fair.
So I don't know. Like I hear you, and I think that you're right. Like if you do get a Curtis Rourke that's maybe rusty coming back, and maybe he doesn't have quite the same arm strength because he doesn't have the same grip on the ball and stuff like that. Like, I hear you on that, but I still look at this guy and think he has such good decision making. He is so cool, calm, and collected. And there is something about an offense that runs this smooth that just has a leader. And I think that was the part of Curtis Rourke that I didn't anticipate coming into the season. I thought he'd be really good in the Big Ten because he was good at Ohio. Yeah. I didn't anticipate that he could lead this good of an offense because I didn't see the leadership capabilities. Yeah. But man, when they go to that sideline for IU, Curtis Rourke, he's up there with every single guy. He's being a leader. He's getting on those guys, and it's like a mini Cignetti out there, right? As much as Cignetti expects stuff from his team, Curtis Rourke is the same way. He is completely bought into this Cignetti brand of ball, and I just, again, I'm not saying you're wrong or like disrespecting what you're saying. I just look at it and I'm like, they got so much leadership. Cignetti has proved he's such a great coach. I would be surprised if they win by less than 14.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would be surprised.
That's fair.
So, what'd you say your score prediction was again?
34-23.
34-23. Okay. So what? That's 11. So okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see what happens. So
yeah.
I got all these written down now, so we can actually go back and look at it.
Now you're keeping receipts.
Yeah. All right. We got Oregon and Michigan. Zach, Oregon favored by 15.5. The over under on this one is 45.5. Warren does look like he's going to continue to be the starter. Had a good game for what they asked him to do. It wasn't anything, spectacular, like 100 some yards and one touchdown, but I mean, he did what he was asked to do, right? He didn't come out there and light anything up, but they didn't need him to, the way they were able to move the ball around. Will Johnson, he remains questionable. Sharon Moore in his press conference was adamant that this is not an issue of him sitting for the draft or anything like that. He was adamant that he will be back at some point this season. We'll see when that is. I'm not banking on this game. I feel like there would be some more talk about him practicing and stuff if he was. However, Sharon Moore might just be playing that close to the vest. We'll see. But if Will Johnson's out, Zach, it could be a long day for these Michigan corners because these Oregon wide receivers are really, really good. Your thoughts?
Remember how I picked Michigan to upset Oregon? That's
what are you talking about?
Yeah. Just throw out my preseason predictions.
Yeah. I'm going to go make that video unlisted for a second. Hold on.
Yeah. That ain't happening in this game. I mean, you want to talk about bad matchups. This is a bad matchup and it doesn't matter that Oregon is going to Michigan. I think Oregon's going to throw it all over the yard. And I don't see how Michigan scores more than 10. So I've got 38-10. I think it's over by halfway through the third quarter.
Wow, Philip with the 56-3. And Philip has an idea. Not like you couldn't, the show is recorded. You go back and write down. It's just a lot of work, Philip.
Yeah, we have actual jobs too.
I'm not trying to be lazy. I feel like I work pretty hard on the show. But that might be an idea. I'll just have to save for next year where I go back to do the score predictions and stuff. But honestly, like I could see a 56-3. I'm not predicting that it will happen because Oregon does seem to kind of get out to that. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Philip. Oregon does seem to get out to that lead of, 35, 38 points and then just kind of sit on it in the third and the fourth quarter. I think that's a fine strategy. I'm not really against it. I've heard some people say like, oh, they can't finish games. It seemed like they finished the game against Ohio State pretty good. So I'm not too worried about that. But I do look at this one and I just think like, other than Michigan's defensive line stopping the run, I don't know what Michigan does to stop this offense. Like it's gonna take mistakes by Oregon in order for Michigan to win this game, and that's just a bad spot to be in. You can't hope that your opponent has to make mistakes in order for you to win, but that's just kind of where they find themselves right now. I don't mean to disrespect Michigan's defensive line because they have three very good defensive tackles in Mason Graham, Rayshon Benny, who is back now, and Kenneth Grant. And they're able to rotate those guys, and that really helps. But when you look at, and Josiah Stewart, wonderful pass rusher off the edge. But you look at this game and like, I don't see what Michigan is going to do to win this one. I think that they benefited from the speed of Alex Orji against some of the Michigan State stuff on the outside. I don't think Oregon is lacking for speed in this one. And I don't think Michigan's wide receivers are big enough for you to have the advantage with like the jump balls and stuff like that. Like they have pretty small wide receivers. So for me, like I don't really see a situation where Michigan stops them. Like I could see this game being a lot like Texas, Michigan, where they just kind of get out early and then they just kind of sit on the lead. And so my prediction is 31-16 Oregon, but it's not nearly as close as the score looks. I think Oregon does the thing again where they get out to a big lead and they kind of sit on it. And then Michigan's offense kind of works a little bit in the second half and gets some points, makes it look closer. But at the end of the day, Oregon will win this one pretty handily.
Yeah, I think to that, I think the thing that I think Oregon's offense is what gets a lot of the accolades. I don't know how Michigan's going to move the ball because they don't have receivers to stretch the field. Their running game last week against Michigan State without Orji, it was terrible. And has there been any word about Khalil Mullings and what's going on with him in terms of suspension?
Yeah, so the Big Ten came out and said that they could not find what exactly happened or what who he was doing it to. So since they didn't have any evidence of what happened, they were not going to suspend him.
Ah, yes, cowardice. I see.
Yeah, seems a little bogus to me, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. I'm not gonna say it on a Big Ten show. Anyway,
moving on.
Yeah. Even with Mullings, they were terrible running the ball against, quite honestly, not as good of a defensive line. Like, and I get that. We still don't know about Birch. He's been out the past couple games.
Yeah.
Derek Harmon is the eater of worlds. He's gonna be the best defensive tackle on the field on Saturday.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, Mason Graham and Rayshon Benny have higher PFF grades. I posted that today.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at big moments and what they've done when it matters most, yeah, or Derek Harmon did more than Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant have done to Texas or other big name teams like that.
Yeah, and let me just give I'll give context there. I think Mason Graham is probably the best defensive tackle in all college football. But I think in terms of what has been proven and what I think they're going to do, like I think Derek Harmon is actually going.
I think he's saying defensive lineman. Birch is an edge, but yeah, Birch is very good too.
Yeah. I think Harmon and what he can do to abuse Michigan's offensive line is going to be more effective than the tandem that you mentioned against Oregon's offensive line.
Yeah. I would not be surprised to see another Derek Harmon burst through the line and just tear the ball out of a running back's hand or something like that. That was the manliest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like,
yeah,
that was just pure. That was just pure. I'm stronger than you. I'm going to run over you, and you have no chance. That was honestly just incredible to see. Even as an Ohio State fan, I watched that and I was like, "Oh my gosh! Like that's incredible."
He's pretty good.
Yep. I do think there's something to be said about Oregon and in their red zone and stuff like that. I've seen some people point out that their red zone efficiency hasn't been all that great. That's been from a few moments earlier on in the season. They've been perfect in the red zone the past 2 weeks, and then against Ohio State, they only had one time where they didn't come through with a score in the red zone, and that's just. I mean, that's Ohio State's defense. It's a really good defense. What are you going to do? Yeah. But they think they still went 4 for 5 in that game or something like that. So they did a really good job. And then Michigan, they do a good job of stopping some teams in the red zone, but some of that has been against weaker competition. So that kind of skews that stat a little bit. So yeah. All right. I don't think I have anything else from this one, Zach. You have anything else?
I think Oregon big.
They'll probably sit on the lead, so it probably won't look as big, but yeah. So, all right, everybody, we're going to hit another commercial, and then we will be right back. The Big Ten Huddle is brought to you by the College Huddle, the largest fan-led college sports podcast community on the internet. With contributors from 70 different schools, you will get in all kinds of analysis from all over the country. Go visit thecollegehuddle.com to find your team and read articles from all across so many fans and contributors. The College Huddle is fan-made, fan-driven, and fan-fueled. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we appreciate everybody being here. Yes, LFG put it in there like number 4. We got a good amount of people watching right now. If you don't mind, please do like the show. It definitely helps. And if you're watching after the fact, like and leave us comments, something you think about the show. Maybe even if it's in the middle of it, just comment and let us know. We appreciate that. Also, do check out basketball season is fast approaching. Games start November 4th, and we have our basketball channel up and running. We'll also be streaming those basketball episodes here on this channel, so you will see those here, but it does help us out because we are going to be posting those videos that are like segments of the live show over on the basketball channel. So if you're somebody that likes basketball at all, definitely go check that out. Like and subscribe. That would subscribe, I guess, but if you watch a video, like it. So, all right, Zach, Minnesota, Illinois. This is a big game. Not necessarily for like national perspective and stuff like that, but you do have Illinois coming off the loss to Oregon. They're still ranked, but they're looking to prove themselves. And then you have Minnesota, who just came off the huge win against Maryland, kind of showing that they are not just this running team that they've been in the past. They have a very good quarterback who can bring the passing game, looking to get to 8 to 9 wins this season. This is a huge battle for them to do that. Illinois is in luck. It looks like Pat Bryant, Terrence Brooks, Torrey Cox, Caleb Patterson, and Joe Barna all are expected to return. Looks like they've all made it back to practice. And then Tyler Strain, he is most likely going to be back, but he's probably the one that's the most in question right now, according to Brett Bielema. So I think that's good news for Illinois, and I think they're going to need those guys back because this is going to be a tough game for both sides. Zach, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, first off, Illinois fans are holding their breath because if I pick against them, it might as well be a win for them. So it's big. This is a big decision for me. In all seriousness, I think I'm really curious to see if Illinois can establish the run because I feel like out of all the things they've been able to do well, that's the one area where I feel like they have really struggled. And I think where Minnesota is actually really strong is that they have a pretty good secondary, right? Justin Wally has been a really good corner for them. Corey Parrish is an epiphany as a freshman, 5 picks. And so it's strength on strength for Illinois with their receivers going up against Minnesota. And it looks like Jason had mentioned that Bryant has not, like he's maybe back at practice, but hasn't passed the concussion protocol yet.
Yeah, the guy I read today said that he was interpreting Brett Bielema's words that he hasn't passed it yet, but he is expected to pass it based on his kind of development. So that's the words of a writer. That's not straight from the coach, but that was what I got from it. So
yeah. So if Bryant plays, like it's strength on strength. If he doesn't play, they still have Zachary Franklin, but I would give advantage Minnesota at that point. If both Bryant and Franklin play, I think it's maybe more of a push, maybe slight edge to Illinois. But I'm concerned about their ability to be two-dimensional because I don't know if Illinois can run on this Minnesota team. And I think on the other side, man, what a matchup with Illinois' secondary against this passing attack with Max Brosmer. And I think Brosmer is really ascending. He's really playing well. I think Luke Altmaier had a rough game against Oregon. Everybody's going to have a rough game against Oregon, right? Like Oregon's really good. But I think Altmaier is still one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the conference. And so I think this has the potential to be the best game of the weekend.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Unless Northwestern Purdue has something to say about it.
No.
No, I'm just messing with you. Yeah, no, I think this is going to be a great game. I think that Minnesota comes in. They've been really good on third down this season, 17th in the nation in third down conversion percentage, and that holds up for just about every game. That's not, based on like Rhode Island or Nevada or something like that. Like they've been good on third down all season long. That's something that definitely is a tip in the cap to them. And then Illinois, you look at them on third down and what they've allowed, they are the 17th worst in the nation in allowing third down conversions. So that's going to be a big thing for Illinois. Are they going to be able to buckle down and stop Minnesota? Because Minnesota, they have not turned the ball over a ton. They have 1 turnover in their past 3 games, and that 1 turnover was against USC. So in their past 2 games, they have 0 turnovers. So for me, I mean, we talk about it all the time, and I try not to be cliche. I try to look a little bit deeper, but there's just sometimes when you have to be cliche and look at it this way. Illinois has got to turn the ball over on Minnesota in order to beat them, because I think that they can stop Minnesota at times on third down, but I don't think it's going to be consistent enough just because of the way Minnesota's been able to scheme up their third downs, and I really like what they've been able to do there. It's going to be a tough test for Illinois, but if they are able to get 1 or 2 picks in this one and capitalize off those with the offense, that's going to be huge for them. And I mean, we know Illinois can do it, right? They did it against Nebraska in that big game. This game has given me a lot of Nebraska-Illinois vibes. Of course, this one is at home for Illinois, and I would not be surprised if we see this one going into overtime like that game did. It's going to be a huge piece there. And then the other thing is that Minnesota's offensive line has been much better lately, and Illinois needs to capitalize on some of their pass rush and what they're able to do and try to fight Minnesota out of that. That's one of the reasons why Brosmer has been, such a good quarterback lately, is because he hasn't had as much pressure on him. Illinois didn't do a very good job of getting to Gabriel, and when Brosmer has time, he can throw that deep ball. So for me, I'm going to be looking a lot at the pass plays and what Minnesota is going to be able to do. I feel pretty confident they're not going to let Darius Taylor just run wild. I think Darius Taylor is going to have a Darius Taylor day, 4 or 5 yards per rush, that kind of stuff. But I think it comes down to the passing game, kind of on both sides, right? Like we talked about with Pat Bryant, Zakhari Franklin versus this Minnesota secondary. Both sides, it kind of is going to come down to the passing game, which is weird talking about a PJ Fleck, Brett Bielema game, but I feel like that's the circumstance we're in.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think an X factor in this game is Darius Taylor as a receiver. 34 catches, 257 yards, 2 touchdowns right now. And I think he has been a key target for Brosmer, particularly when things have broken down.
And he's been able to go to instead of trying to scramble, because Max Brosmer is a statue, right? I mean, he doesn't have the legs to be able to scramble like that. So he's who he's able to go to in those situations. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and so I think that's the X factor for me. And while I do really like Illinois, I feel like it probably doesn't because I pick against them all the time. I do like Minnesota in this game to win. And I think it's close. I think if some of those guys weren't playing, I had a larger margin of victory. But because a lot of those guys are coming back, I think it's a defensive game. Like, I think both defenses are going to make some plays. I would not be surprised if both Brosmer and Altmaier throw at least one pick, because these secondaries are good. Like, they're certainly upper half of the Big Ten secondaries, if not top third of the conference secondaries. And so I like Minnesota in a close one. I got 21-17.
Yeah, I also like Minnesota. I'm sorry, Illinois fans. I think Minnesota in this one because I'm just more confident in Minnesota's secondary getting those turnovers because it's happened more often lately. I know Illinois can do it, and to me, that's the biggest factor. If Illinois comes out and they get 2 or 3 turnovers, not necessarily just interceptions, fumbles, whatever it is, if they do that, that's going to be huge, and that's going to make me completely rethink this prediction. But right now, I'm predicting Minnesota's probably the team that's more likely to get those turnovers. And it's not even because it's Luke Altmaier. I just think Justin Wally in that Minnesota secondary is just that good. And I think Minnesota is going to have a better time stopping the run than Illinois is. Like I said, Darius Taylor's not going to run wild. He's not going to have some crazy 200-yard game or something like that. But he is going to be able to get his. He's going to get 4 to 5 yards per carry, and it's going to be difficult for this Illinois defense, but that is the biggest differentiator. The turnovers, Can they make it happen? Can they keep Minnesota from third down by getting turnovers in the game? And like I said, if Illinois gets 2 or 3 turnovers, completely take out my prediction, throw it away. But if Illinois only gets 1 or less turnovers, I think this is Minnesota's game.
Yeah.
Did I say the score? I think
no, you did not.
My score's prediction is 27-20.
Okay. Now, I mean, here's the thing, though. I picked against Illinois. So Illinois is going to win.
But I picked against Illinois.
So Illinois is going to lose.
So Illinois is going to lose.
They're going to wooze.
Because I picked against them in the Oregon game, and they lost.
That's true. Well, and I did too, so.
Well, Oregon kind of ruins all the superstition, I guess.
Yeah, what the heck, Oregon?
Come on,
Get
Oregon.
out of our conference. No, I'm kidding. We love you.
No, stay, please. we need to defeat the SEC. Stay, please. Yeah, no. I think this is such a great game, and I'm so excited to watch it. What time slot is it? Is it 3:30?
This game is 12 o'clock. It's the same as...
This one's at noon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
so
is
unfortunate.
this actually feels like it would have been a good Saturday night game. Although
Yeah.
Wisconsin, Iowa is, I think, a nighttime game. But
Yeah, Wisconsin, Iowa, and that one has a little bit more juice just because of the rivalry. But yeah, this is gonna be fun too. Yeah, I'm gonna have to rewatch that one on Sunday morning. So I'll because I'll have the Ohio State Penn State one on. But if I want to watch with the sound, which I do like to do because I hear the crowd and everything. Which, by the way, 2020 stunk so much because you could never hear the crowd or anything. That was one of the worst parts of it. So yeah, Illinois fans, feel free to grill me if I'm wrong. Fine by me. Minnesota fans, if I jinxed you, feel free to grill me for that too. Totally fine. Just like and subscribe and comment. So
grill him. Sorry, grill him. Yeah. Grill him. Don't grill me.
Let me know. All right. Let's see. LFG. Is LFG talking about pizzas?
I think it's a.
It's me. Okay. I thought he was talking about min pizzas. I was like, minimum pizzas. He says Minnesota pisses me off because I like the whole Illinois team and their head coach. Don't like the vibe around Illinois right now. It's tough. Illinois, they've dropped their two biggest games of the season right now, and this is going to be a big point for Illinois and what this team is made of, right? If they come out and they win this game against Minnesota, everybody was talking about it in the chat, like, not only is Brett Bielema still undefeated against PJ Fleck, but that just shows the resilience of this team and who they are, that they know, hey, we're not going to win the Big Ten, but we can still have a really good year. We can get 9-10 wins this season, and it can still be a really good year. So a lot of props to Illinois for sure. And then Minnesota, them too, they've had a lot of props this year with what they've been able to do. Losing that first game would have been easy to lie down, but they battled back against USC. Even after the Michigan game, right? It would have been easy to lay down after that one. But next week you come out against USC. So, yeah. Big time credit. All right. Zach, should we get to Wisconsin, Illinois?
Let's do it. You mean Wisconsin, Iowa?
Yes. Got Illinois on the brain. Illinois.
That other I team.
Yeah. Wisconsin and Iowa. Iowa is favored by 3 points in this one. The over-under, Zach, it's an Iowa game, and the over-under is over 40. Congrats. I'm just kidding. It's been that way this season. But
because Brendan Sullivan is starting. That's
right. They know. Actually, Iowa scored 40 points in 2 games this season. So, Tim Lester.
Extend Kirk Ferentz.
Or extend Tim Lester.
Yeah, that's
you think
right.
Tim Lester, if Kirk Ferentz retires sometime soon, do you think Tim Lester would take over as the coach? Or do you think Phil Parker would? I think Phil Parker's too old.
Yeah, I would think it has to be Tim Lester if you're going to have one of them. I would imagine they'd do a national search, though.
But they've always hired from within, right? Like, I guess I should say always. The past 2 coaches, it's just been like the past 50 years.
I was going to say, Ferentz has been there for like 25, 26 years.
Yeah, and then the coach before that, he was hired from within too. So
yeah,
we'll have to ask Jeffrey from Eyes on Big. He would know.
Yeah, this game is weird because I just put out a video last week saying, is Wisconsin a dark horse playoff team? And then I thought
if they beat Penn State, they would have been.
Yeah, and I thought like early on in that game, I thought they were looking like they could do it, but I think what I've always kind of thought to be true about Braden Locke came true again, which is that he looks good against subpar competition, but like he's not an adequate starter in the Big Ten. Like he just really isn't. And
he's not a difference maker. I think that's the hardest thing. I think he can lead a Big Ten team that's able to run the ball to wins and has a good O-line, which that's what this Wisconsin team is, and that's how they've won games in the Big Ten. But he's not a difference maker. He's not going to win you the game late against the Penn State or against an Oregon or Ohio State. It's just not who he is.
Yeah. And I thought he was starting to turn the corner, and I thought he reverted back to who I thought he was before. So, and I think what's hard, like I think Wisconsin's gotten better. But man, Iowa with Brendan Sullivan, I feel like is a game changer. Caleb Johnson is a stud. We've been saying that all year, but like already over 1,000 yards, 1,144 yards, 16 touchdowns on less than 150 carries. That's insane.
He's been Ashton Genty, man. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously not to that same level because he's playing more difficult competition, but I contend you put Caleb Johnson on Boise State, you swap those two out.
Yeah.
Caleb Johnson is having Ashton Gentry season. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I know that's like some people are gonna be like, oh, you're crazy, but
Yeah.
no, I really think that would happen.
Yeah. And I just look at Wisconsin and I'm like Iowa's defense is not as good as it has been, right? But nobody on Wisconsin makes me go, yeah, they're going to make a difference against a typically solid defense. So I just looking back, Wisconsin had their run against Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. And I'm like, yeah, they scored a lot of points and they held teams, but those teams are just not very good. And I think it's a little bit of fool's gold. And so I think Wisconsin's better. I think they've gotten better. But I think Iowa is I fear Caleb Johnson. And I think Lachey can be a difference maker at tight end. He hasn't been. But I think he could be. And I think Brendan Sullivan is the better quarterback out of these two. And I think he adds a running threat that makes this Iowa team a tough out. And so I think it's close, but because it's home and because I like Sullivan more than Locke, I got 28-24 Iowa.
Yeah, I think the fear of Caleb Johnson is a really good point because for me, I look at this game and my main question is, can Wisconsin stop Caleb Johnson? We've seen it happen. Ohio State stopped Caleb Johnson very well outside of the 175-yard run. Michigan State stopped Caleb Johnson. Now that was at home. This is at Iowa, so that's a little bit of a different scenario. I do think that Wisconsin has a strong enough secondary, especially against Brendan Sullivan, who I'm not saying is a bad quarterback, but let's face it, he's not, Dylan Gabriel. He's not, Drew Aller or somebody like that. Like, that's not who he is. I think he's definitely an upgrade from Cade McNamara, but that's just not who he is. And so I feel like Wisconsin can do what Michigan State did, where they just devote so many resources to stopping the run that they should be able to hold Caleb Johnson in check. But I think the piece of this game that's going to be more interesting is if Tim Lester sees that Caleb Johnson can't get going. I think we've seen it happen gradually now as he starts getting Caleb Johnson more involved in the passing game when that happens. And I don't know if Wisconsin has a great answer for that. Wisconsin struggles with a little bit of athleticism at their linebacker spot. I would argue that was their biggest issue against Alabama, and you saw that issue pop up also against Penn State toward the end of the game. I do think there was some fatigue there as well, but for me, you look at Caleb Johnson and you look at Brendan Sullivan, the playmaking ability. If Wisconsin wants to win this game, they are going to have to capitalize on taking down Caleb Johnson, not making third downs easy, and just getting after the quarterback as best they possibly can in those passing situations. Wisconsin's defensive line has gotten some flack this year, and it's not been great, but I do think it's been improved as the season has gone on. And ever since that week 2, Wisconsin has gotten more pressure without the blitz than they have with the blitz every single game except for one when I think they were tied. And so that shows Wisconsin's defensive line is getting better and they are being more productive. Mm-hmm. But in this game against Iowa, you're going to have to see that a lot more because you're not going to be able to blitz a bunch because of the threat of Caleb Johnson. Now, if you blitz into the run, great. But if you blitz to one side, Caleb Johnson's going the other way.
He's going to be 75 quick.
Yeah, it's all over.
Yeah.
So for me, I just look at this and say, if I'm Wisconsin, I am hoping so much that Iowa has another missed tackle game like they had against Michigan State. Now, against Northwestern, they didn't. 6 missed tackles against Northwestern. They were solid. Now, of course, Sebastian Castro was back for that one, so that helps. But if you can get Iowa missing tackles again and get why am I blanking on his name right now? Tyree Walker out in space a little bit more, and he's going to be able, and the other running back, Cade, Yalmac, or however you pronounce his last name. I apologize. If you can get those guys working, get them out in space, and really take care of the secondary and their tackling, that would be great. But I have a feeling that Phil Parker saw that bad tackling against Michigan State, and he's not going to let that happen again this season.
Yeah.
So I have Iowa 24-20.
Wow, we're really close on that one too.
We are really close. Yeah.
I saw your scores, but I looked at them after I picked mine. So I was not trying to
So you didn't copy me.
No, I didn't. Did not copy you.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Seeing a lot of people asking about it's funny. Once we get through Indiana, we normally have some people asking about Ohio State. So it's like we get the Indiana crowd, and then the Ohio State crowd comes in and starts asking about Ohio State. I think it's funny how the chat can change sometimes. I wonder how many Indiana fans stick around. Hey, to Brenton's credit, he's still here. What trophy is in Dawson's hands? You might be talking to somebody else. I don't know what you're talking about there, Brenton. But anyway, hey, we're going to do another commercial really fast, and then we'll be right back, and we will finish up the show by talking about Ohio State, Penn State. Stay with us. Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, and we have an appearance from Doreen on Twitter. Doreen, thanks for being with us. We appreciate that. Doreen is all over YouTube, all over Twitter, watching so many shows and supporting them. Doreen, you are a treasure, and we greatly appreciate your support and being here, as we do everybody else as well. Always like to point out if there's somebody new in the chat or anything like that. And Brenton, IU, Big Ten soccer champs. There we go.
Yeah.
So, Zach, if you need a bandwagon for a soccer team, I use your team.
What's soccer again? Sorry, that's bad.
It's the other football, not this football.
So like rugby.
Yeah, no.
Okay, just move on.
We'll move on.
I know one sport in this world, and it's American football. That's it.
There we go. That's all I want in my life. American football. All right. Ohio State, Penn State. Zach, Ohio State is favored in this one by 3.5 points. Penn State and Ohio State have the over-under of 45.5, a little bit of a lower point total, but you have that when you have two. I mean, these are good offenses, but also two very good defenses in my mind, even though there's a lot of people questioning that after the Oregon game. I think Ohio State still has an elite defense, top 10 at worst, and Penn State as well, top 10 at worst in all of college football. So I'm torn on this one, Zach.
Mm-hmm.
I have a really hard time because I think overall Ohio State is probably the better team, and I'm not being biased. However, watching Nebraska, it's not so much everything that happened. It was more the offensive line and how much I'm concerned about, number one, the staff thought the left tackle was the best option, and now that left tackle is most likely not playing. It does look like everybody else seems to be healthy. Drew Aller, I think he's going to play. Denied Dennis Sutton, I think he's going to play from what I've been reading. I'm not sure about the right tackle for Penn State. But it does look like most of the guys who seem to be injured will most likely play, other than the right tackle for Penn State, which I'm just not sure about, and then Zen Mikulski, who was filling in at left tackle for Ohio State. So I'm interested to see how that happens. But, Zach, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, Dorian just said what I was thinking. Zen is actually probably going to play.
He will play. Okay.
Yeah, Ryan Day mentioned that in the press conference that they thought Zen would be okay.
Okay.
I don't know how that bodes for Ohio.
I just saw him leave on a cart, and I saw him on crutches, and I was like, not normally a good sign.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a good sign if he plays, and that's not against Zen. I think it's my frustration with Justin Fry, and Ryan Day for that matter. So I think I've had some time to come like to come away from that Nebraska abomination. And I think the truth for Ohio State is somewhere in the middle of like what we've seen, because the reality is they played a good team in Iowa. And in the second half, like the first half, they shot themselves in the foot, but really should have been up 21 or 28 nothing. And then they completely outclassed Iowa. And I don't think they're maybe as good yet as what they showed in the second half of Iowa. I don't think they're actually as bad as what they showed against Nebraska, including the offensive line. So I think it's hard because I'm like, okay, so is the middle of that better than Penn State? Or how do they match up? And I came in today thinking that I would pick Penn State. And I think as I've thought about it, I'm like, where can Penn State exploit the weaknesses of Ohio State defensively? Because I think what we've seen teams exploit is kind of down the field passing and then being able to run, kind of run past the defense with bad discipline on the rush, at least against Nebraska. And I'm like, I think Amari Evans might be able to get one. Like, I think he's talented. I don't know if Penn State has another receiver that can really get behind the defense. And I think Tyler Warren is a matchup nightmare regardless. But like, those would be the two guys where I'm like, that's a tough matchup. But other than that, like the way Penn State wants to attack you is more at the sides and in the intermediate. And I think Ohio State's a bit stronger there. So I'm not saying it's definitive, but I think the way Penn State wants to attack you actually favors Ohio State. Unlike Oregon, where they really tried to attack downfield and they had the receivers to do it. I don't think Penn State has the receivers to do it consistently.
Yeah, I think I look more at the run game in this one than you do. And when I say I'm concerned about the run game, I think that's going to come across as mostly Zen Mikulski and the concern there. It's not so much that Zen did a pretty good job of blocking in the run game. The concern I have is how dysfunctional the run game looked for Ohio State against Nebraska. It's one thing if you just kind of have an off day, but the way the line looked, there were times where it just looked like guys were just completely whiffing on their blocks. You had the play where the two guards thought they were both pulling different ways and they ran into each other. And, that kind of stuff happens, right? I wouldn't be as concerned if it was just kind of a one-time thing and all the starters are in there. It is what it is. But when you have the question of, is then Mikulski going to play? Sounds like he is, but even if he does, is he going to have a lot of time to practice this week? Is everybody going to be on the same page? I think that's an underrated part of offensive line play is how much people who play next to each other are used to one another and how effective that can be. I think that Ohio State did a really good job when Donovan Jackson didn't play early on in the year and Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin were able to show they were able to play next to somebody, even if they were unfamiliar with them. So I think that was good. But it didn't look like the offensive line for Ohio State was as in sync, especially on that left side, which has been your strong side. I guess it would be right side because right tackle, right guard, especially on that right side because that's been such a strong spot for your offensive line. In the Oregon game, when they were going to run behind somebody, who did they run behind? Josh Simmons, Donovan Jackson. Tom Fornelli pointed it out on the Cover 3 podcast earlier today with their breakdown of this game. And he said ever since Josh Simmons has been out, no matter who's been in there, Ohio State has ran the ball 60 times or had 60 running snaps, I guess is the way he put it. And the yards per carry was 2.4. And you saw that against Oregon and you saw that against Nebraska as well. So that gives me some concern. Yeah. And then also, Zach, I just think Andy Kotelnicki is a really good offensive coordinator. I think that he's really schemed up some nice things for this offense. I agree. I'm not super scared of Penn State's wide receivers. I don't think they're going to be able to pull what Oregon's wide receivers were pulling and completely burn Burke and those guys and stuff like that. And I do think that they have struggled with drops. Julian Fleming dropped a third down catch that then resulted in the fumbled snap on the QB sneak against Wisconsin. They probably would have scored on that drive. But for me, if Ohio State wants to win that game, they have got to come out in the first half firing. I'm talking 20-plus points because Penn State, as much as I think Andy Kotelnicki is very smart in what he does, he's very good with the halftime adjustments.
Yep.
Penn State has only been leading at halftime in 2 games so far this season. Yep. And they've played like a ton of, I wouldn't say a ton of bad teams. They've played teams that they should be leading against in the first half, but they weren't against USC. They weren't against Bowling Green. They weren't against Wisconsin. Like there were teams that they were playing where they should have been leading. And so if I'm Ohio State, you got to have this offense figured out right away, score 20-plus points on Penn State, and then just hope your defense can ride it out until the end of the game. I guess not hope. You should be confident in your defense. This is, like I said, it's the top 10 defense in the country. But you have to know that your defense can then ride that out for the rest of the game, despite Andy Kotelnicki's adjustments and what he's going to do.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. I think both of those are my biggest concerns. Is I think Andy Kotelnicki against Jim Knowles, I give the nod to Kotelnicki. And I think that slow start, fast start is a really good point. The run game has to get fixed. And I think Penn State's run game could give Ohio State some heartburn throughout this game. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen is a really good running back duo. I mean, I think Jordan James might be Jordan James and Caleb Johnson are probably the 2 best backs that they will have faced up to this point. They're certainly the best backs they've faced up to this point, and I think they're both probably individually better. But I think as a tandem, they're not going to see a better tandem this year. I mean, this is the best tandem they'll face, and I think where Singleton is particularly dangerous is in the passing game, right? So he's very good running the ball. But I mean, he can be very explosive out wide and, on swing passes, on screens. And that's where I am a bit nervous, especially with Kotelnicki scheming things up. And of course, Tyler Warren. I mean, where is he going to line up? He'll probably line up at left tackle at some point. And,
Did you see when they put that offensive lineman in motion against Wisconsin?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, what do you do if you're a cornerback, and you go out there and they line up an offensive lineman across the line of scrimmage from you? Like, what do you do? Yeah. And then they motion him in, and then he hit the backside blocker, and then boom, took off and had a big run. It was so creative. I really like Andy Kotelnicki.
He's great. He's really good.
Philip is asking, is Drew Aller playing?
Most likely.
So Franklin said it was a game time decision. It seems like it was an ankle or something like that, which to me, you can shoot that up with so much, painkiller and stuff like that. I think he plays. And especially, like, you remember after that game last year, Penn State, Ohio State, I mean, he looked so determined. He looked so, I mean, he was sad too, don't get me wrong, but there was there was a look in that eye that, he wasn't going to let this happen again. And that's another reason why I'm so excited about this game, is because you have Drew Aller with that look in his eye, and he wants to play, and he wants to beat Ohio State so bad. And then you have, on the other side, Will Howard, the Pennsylvania kid who wasn't recruited by Penn State, and he's upset, and he wants to prove it to Penn State and all that stuff. Like, this is just 2 quarterbacks against each other that are both going to be playing with all the heart in the world. And obviously, as an Ohio State fan, I want Ohio State to win. But if I can sit back for a second and just say, as a college football fan, like, quarterback matchups, it doesn't get better than this.
Yep.
I
think it's a great matchup.
What Brenton says, who gets fraud checked in this game? I don't know what you mean by that. I guess you're saying whoever loses is a fraud. Yeah, I mean, maybe, but just two top 5 teams. I guess both coaches haven't performed well against top 5 and top 10, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think it was
Dorian says the
Fornelli?
JJ McCarthy of Ohio State.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Is it Tom Fornelli who said that this is a game where like something's got to give? Like Penn State doesn't beat Ohio State, and Ryan Day, James Franklin doesn't beat Ohio State, and Ryan Day doesn't beat top 5 teams.
Yeah, it's like two immovable forces. One of them has to move.
Yeah.
Watch us get eight overtimes in this one.
No. Oh gosh, no. No.
Penn State's done it before, Zach.
Please no.
They could do it again.
I hate the new overtime system, by the way.
It is really stupid.
It's so I don't care if it takes another hour. Just play the 25-yard thing. Like these 2-point conversions, it's so stupid. Anyway, so I'll give my I'll give my score and my rationale. I probably up until about 5 o'clock today, I was very much willing to pick Penn State.
Oh.
Like I said, I think there's a couple things that are going in this. One, Ryan Day, especially the past 3 years, has stunk after the bye. So like after Notre Dame, they win that game. They're losing to Maryland at half. Like after the bye. In 2020, they almost lost to Indiana. Indiana was good. They weren't nearly as good as like Ohio State was that year. In 2020. And then I think in 2022, who did they struggle with?
In 2022?
Yeah, they struggled with someone off of a bye. In 2022. Let me look it up real quick.
You keep talking. I'll look it up. Go ahead.
Okay.
You keep talking.
But like Ryan Day, like everybody looks at the bye as really good or as a really big thing. And I'm like, actually, he hasn't been great, especially against decent teams. Like against bad teams, he's blown teams out after bye weeks, but against decent teams, he's not great. And which makes me think, okay, I wonder, like he spent a lot of time with the defense. And I think while I still have a lot of concerns defensively, it makes sense that if he spent most of the time with the defense, he wasn't going to address the offensive line that much. Hopefully, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I probably shouldn't. But hopefully he does at least a little bit of reshuffling. I just think if you look up and down the roster and you look at the advantages for Penn State and the advantages for Ohio State, I do think it still favors Ohio State a little bit. And I think the key that you're talking about, I think if Ohio State can spring on Penn State early enough, I think that really bodes well for them because Penn State has not started fast in almost any game they've played, including against Kent State, which I know, John Jacobs, I know you're in the chat. This is your time to talk about.
He's not posted lately, so he may have left after we got done with Indiana.
Yeah. But I have to think that going to Happy Valley actually might wake Ohio State up. And like, I think they know that their backs are against the wall. And I would like to think that, so this might be some hopium, but I will say against Oregon, I was I felt like I had a good read on that game. And I picked it 34-31. It was 32-31, Oregon. I feel like as I've thought about it, I really do think that talent's going to win out. And so I've got a one-score game. I've got 28-20, Ohio State.
Okay. So the bye
Tell me
week,
why I'm wrong.
The bye week in 2022, Ohio State actually played Iowa, and they actually beat them 54-10.
Yeah.
So he killed them that time.
But
then they played Penn State next, and that was the crazy game by JT Tuimoloau that saved them, and they won 44-31.
That score is very misleading for Iowa, though.
Yeah,
because it was not great in the first half.
yeah. Well, it's kind of like this Iowa game against Ohio State this year a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not gonna tell you you're wrong. I just like I have a different feeling. I think the key of scoring 20 plus points in the first half is the biggest key for me for Ohio State to win this one.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think Ohio State is going to come out trying to run the ball and trying to enforce that as much as they possibly can. Ohio State came out against Oregon, they were throwing. They were going for it. I mean, they were throwing it all over the yard. I don't think that happens in this game. I think that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are hell bent on trying to get this team to be able to run the ball. And I think they're going to be too focused on it. And I think you're going to find it being a 10 to 14, 14 to 14 type of game at the end of the first half. Ohio State might be up, but it won't be by much. And then I think Andy Kotelnicki makes the adjustments. And in the second half, Penn State pulls ahead. Ohio State needs a game winning drive. And honestly, Zach, I can see Ohio State losing because they have a field goal to tie it and they miss it.
Yep.
And they try to have
Yeah.
some kind of 38, 40-yard field goal and they miss it. I think Penn State wins this one 20 to 17. I hate that I'm saying that. I don't want to pick Penn State to win, but I look at this team. I think this is different than other James Franklin teams. I really do. Ohio State has not, or Ryan Day has never faced a top 5 Penn State team. The last time Ohio State played a top 5 Penn State team was 2017, I think was the year when they had to make the huge comeback and Urban Meyer was the coach and JT Barrett went crazy. I think that Penn State was good enough to beat Ohio State that year and they lost it, obviously. I don't think Ryan Day's teams have that in them to come back like that. I could be wrong, and I hope I am wrong. And I'm not trying to, like go after Ryan Day here or anything like that because, we talked about him enough. But I look at it honestly and I say, I don't think they're going to come out early and score a bunch. And that concerns me. And I don't think the running game is going to be there. I think Penn State is going to outrun Ohio State. And I think in November football in the Big Ten, if you don't win the rushing battle, 90% of the time, you're not going to win the game.
I agree. So I'm getting accused of being a homer here, and I'm just gonna say this. I think if what you say happens, they absolutely will lose. They absolutely will lose. And I think this is my other thought, and I didn't say this before. Chip Kelly called his worst game against Nebraska.
And that's the other piece. Did he call his worst game, or was he trying to force something onto the team? Like, that's my hope. I don't know. Like, I hope that Chip Kelly was just trying to force something onto this team and they had a hard time. And what I mean by that, if you didn't watch the last show, I talked about how I thought Chip Kelly was just trying to force the offensive line to run block and saying be more physical than them. And it never worked out, and that's why the game got so close. And then eventually at the end, you saw Will Howard pulling the ball and them throwing the ball more because it was Chip Kelly saying, well, not going to help us to run, so we got to win it here. Will Howard, you can go ahead and start pulling the ball now. Anyway, go ahead, Zach.
Well, and I just think, and again, when I say I'm picking Ohio State to win, I'm like 51-49, like on this. Like, and the only reason why I have it at 8-point margin is I just could see where Ohio State gets up early and is able to kind of suffocate. Here's where I think Ohio State could really do some damage is if they do come out throwing. If Jeremiah Smith only has 4 targets in this game, they will lose, probably by double digits.
And no rushing attempts too. If he doesn't have a rushing attempt, like they have got to run some jet sweeps with Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah. But and this is where I'm like, I think they will make a concerted effort to get on the edges, whether it's bubble screens, whether it's, intermediate passes, RPOs. Like they didn't show a lot of the RPO game in that against Nebraska. Or if they did, it wasn't read well, which is very possible. But I think they're I think that's why I have some hope in this game. And I love Kotelnicki. Here's actually my concern for Penn State as I've watched them. Not only do they start slow, but they're not always the most efficient. And so like there's a lot of creativity. But like you look at Penn State's scores, there's only one game they've gone over 35. And that was against Kent State. And that's I think they've been
Where's
good.
John Jacobs when we need him? Mention
Yeah,
Kent State,
yeah,
John.
yeah. Yeah, but like against Wisconsin, 28 and 7 of that was a pick six. USC, I mean, it took them to overtime. They only scored 33, and the 3 of that was in overtime. UCLA only 27, Illinois only 21. Like they have not been a potent offense. They've been a good offense, but they haven't been a real potent offense. And so this is not the same as Oregon. Is I guess my thought. Like Penn State,
Yeah, definitely not the same as Oregon. Yeah,
Penn State has to be more methodical in their approach, and that's where I think it actually plays a bit into Ohio State's hands.
Yeah, and I think Penn State is a little bit better at playing the field position game than Ohio State is. I don't have any super hard and fast stats off the top of my head to pull to say that, but just from watching, I remember Penn State being a better special teams kind of field position type of team than Ohio State has been this year. Now, I will say, if Ohio State runs like 4 or 5 QB sneaks in this game on like 4th and 1 or 3rd and 2 or something like that, I feel a whole lot better because I think you're a whole lot more adept to getting that with a battering ram and Will Howard. But I mean, how many 4th and 1s did we run out of the shotgun? I say we. I'm sorry. How many 4th and 1s did Ohio State run out of the shotgun against Nebraska, Zach? Like, yeah. I don't know. Like Ryan Day and Chip Kelly in the press conference played it off like it was just a game plan against Nebraska, which, like, it could be. That's fine, but if that's the game plan, like, I'm concerned they make that game plan again. So, Penn State Jim says, but Penn State has a better D than Oregon. I think better overall defensive line. I think Derek Harmon is better, but Zane Durant is very close to Derek Harmon. I think Penn State has a better overall defensive line. I think Oregon has more speed. I think Penn State has better safeties. I don't know about cornerbacks. What do you think about cornerbacks?
I think Oregon's corners are better.
Yeah, I mean, AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber have been good.
Yeah, we're I think you're splitting hairs a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember which linebacker. I don't think it's Rojas, but one of the linebackers for Penn State is a bit more of a liability than I think.
Not Kobe King, is it?
Maybe. Oh, maybe I'm thinking of somebody else.
Maybe. Yeah, I think they do things differently. I think they definitely do things differently, and I think they both excel in what they do.
Well, and I think to that point, well, I mean, Simmons was playing against Oregon. Like, it's not like Ohio State struggled a ton against Oregon's defense.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, like situationally, they made mistakes. But like
they struggled to run the ball later in the game, getting some of that short yardage and stuff like that. They definitely didn't have as many explosive runs. I think Travion had one 50-yard run in that one. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good game, and I think I see where like there's a lot of pessimism, and I am too. Like, I'm pessimistic about Ohio State, and I think Penn State could absolutely win this game. I just don't think they're going to have as bad of a showing as they did last week. Yeah. And yeah, I just don't. I think Ohio State's going to. I don't know if they're going to bring their A game, but I think they might bring their B plus game, and I think that's actually enough to beat Penn State.
Yeah, we'll see. We will see this Saturday. It's going to be a really interesting game. Philip asks, why is Penn State and Ohio State not the night game? I have a belief. Yeah, I have a belief that when they did all this stuff, I think Fox, like, I think they basically said, like, yeah, you can bring on CBS and NBC, but Penn State, Ohio State is ours, and Michigan and Ohio State is ours, and you can't take those away from big noon kickoff.
Because weeping and gnashing of teeth.
I don't think it's going to be a long time until we see Ohio State play a night game against Penn State. And I definitely think it's going to be a long time, if ever, we see Ohio State and Michigan not be played at noon or at the very latest at 3:30 again. Because I truly do believe Fox had something in there where they just said, like, these are our games, back off. Because that would be the only thing that would make sense, right? Why Fox would allow two other partners to come in and get these games instead of just paying for them, right? Like, so because Fox Big Noon Kickoff hasn't always had the best game of the week this year. Typically they have, but
no, they're waiting for the big ones.
Yeah, and of course PSU Jim says because Fox sucks. Listen, if I was a Penn State fan, I'd be really mad. I'd be really mad about it too. Jim says Penn State put up 32 on the Buckeyes. Do you expect them to reach 30s in Happy Valley? I don't, because I don't think that Penn State has the wide receivers to score as fast on Ohio State. Maybe they'll prove me wrong. Maybe Julian Fleming will have a JT Tuimoloau game. I don't know. Like maybe that'll happen. But and I realize I'm talking wide receiver, defensive end. I mean like a really, really good game. I suppose that could happen. I honestly, I didn't see it happening with Oregon to Ohio State. So, I've been wrong before, but yeah, I look at that and I think if Penn State's going to score on Ohio State, it's going to be long, methodical drives with good decision making, good scheming, good play calling. That's going to score, in 10, 12 play drives rather than, a 5-6 play drive with a big play. So, All right, Zach. Jim, I meant if OSU puts up 30 in Happy Valley. I don't think the offensive line is as good. I think Josh Simmons made that a top 5 offensive line in the country. And I think without him, like I said, if it was just the left tackle position, I think things would be different. If I just saw the left tackle position struggle, but it wasn't just the left tackle. I saw people not knowing the plays. I saw people miscommunicating. And it could have just been that one game. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm overreacting. But I think without a top 5 offensive line, I don't think Will Howard has the time to throw the deep balls, and I don't think that the running game has the ability to get going as much.
So. I think that's fair.
Yeah. All right, Zach, man, I think we put in a good day's work or night's work because it's nighttime. I guess unless you're watching in like Hawaii or something like that, then it's still in the middle of the day. There you go. Zach, tell us what you want to tell us about Big Ten football talk.
Thursday morning will be the next episode. We'll talk about officiating. We'll talk about this game, and we'll talk about a few other things as well. So I got to plan out the show. So, but it'll be good. So make sure you like, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify. Check us out. And yes, Illini Bubba, I did pick against Illinois. I thought of you specifically. So congratulations. The Illini are going to win.
I picked against them too, so I don't know if I have the same mojo as Zach does, but I guess we will see. And then Jim is saying, thanks, great discussion, good night. Thanks, Jim, for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you to everybody else, even if you left early, if you come back and watch later on or whatever else. We appreciate it. We appreciate all the listeners, and yes, Illini Bubba is very happy. So like I said, Vote Wagon, go vote on that. I will put it in the chat one more time, so if you're listening, please do go vote for the Big Ten Huddle. If you are watching after the fact, it will be in the description. I'm going to go change that right now. We appreciate everybody. Have fun watching football this weekend, and we will see you back for football on Saturday night after the games. We'll have basketball Thursday if you want to check me out with one other person, Might just be me Thursday night. We'll see. It's a Halloween night, so it's going to be hard to get somebody else with me. I'm not wearing a costume. Don't ask me to do that. No hot dog suit, Philip. All right. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Have a good night.